Peter, really good to talk to you. This must be a sense of déjà vu for you today, reading all these headlines. How serious is this sort of development when we are seeing journalists from Australia and the United States particularly feeling as if they have to flee from China?
Look, nobody wins out of this. I think it's a terrible own goal for China, as we've just been hearing. Not having foreign correspondents, not having Australian correspondents inside the country reporting with, I think, a degree of sympathy, because when you're inside a place like that, you really do have the capacity to understand and to dive a little bit more deeply into the politics and culture and society of the place that you're covering. And so by not having anyone there, I think makes it that much harder for China to communicate and for Australians to understand China. But I also think it's a terrible blow for the principle of press freedom as well. There is no doubt that this was harassment. Bill, I think, described it very, very clearly. And it's not only aimed, of course, at those two reporters, it's aimed at every journalist that's operating in China and every foreign correspondent that's there. They will all get the message very, very clearly. They have to toe the party line or they'll find themselves in trouble.
And that's an impossible position for a journalist to be in. So ethically, it's almost better to leave a country that is making you toe the party line.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, I've faced that conundrum myself as a result of what happened to us in Egypt. I'm still technically a convicted terrorist, and it makes my life very difficult if I'm working in any country that has an extradition treaty with Egypt. And so I've made the same sort of calculus. If you can't operate freely and with integrity, then there really is no point in sticking around. And I think in that regard, both of these two journalists really didn't have much choice.
Bill Birtles, as you pointed out, says he felt like a pawn in a diplomatic game. Is this more about the deteriorating relationship than press freedom, or is that a very fine line?
Look, the two, I think, are very closely interconnected. It's impossible to separate the nationality of these two journalists from what's been taking place. Everybody is very aware of the deteriorating relationships between China and Australia. There is absolutely no evidence in any of their reporting that they've done anything to undermine national security, to justify being called in and questioned in this way. So it's hard to see that it had anything to do with their reporting. But at the same time, we also know the way that China has been treating journalists, not just in China itself, but also in mainland China, but also in Hong Kong. Of course, we've seen the terrible story of Cheng Lu, who's the Australian journalist who is also now in detention. All of these things add up to much the same message. If you're an Australian, then I think you need to be very, very careful, because China seems likely to want to use you as a pawn in this wider diplomatic game. But equally, if you're a journalist, I think China will also make it very clear that it expects you to toe that party line or find yourself suffering the consequences.
Our Director of News said he wanted to get a journalist back there on the ground as soon as possible. Do you think that's likely in the foreseeable future with the direction China seems to be going in?
Look, I have absolutely no doubt that Gavin Morris wants to see journalists, ABC journalists, back in there. And I agree with Bill. If I was in Bill's shoes, I'd also want to be back as quickly as possible. But given the way the relations are going, given the way that the direction that things have been moving, it's very difficult to see that it's likely to happen anytime soon.
When a country starts veering to this nationalistic, authoritarian side of politics, does open and free coverage, or any coverage of that country and what's happening within it, like we've seen with what's been happening with the Uyghurs, does it become possible? Does it have to become covert?
If you're going to operate properly, then you have to find ways of moving around and getting information. As I said, I think it is good for China to have journalists operating freely inside their country, foreign correspondents. But I also think it's good it's good when those journalists are doing their jobs and trying to find out what's going on. The system is designed to maintain a degree of openness, of transparency, of accountability, and it's designed to force the authorities in these countries to respond to some difficult questions. That doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It's always very, very difficult for foreign correspondents in these environments, particularly when you are aware that the consequences of your reporting could be very serious, very severe indeed. It's a very, very difficult conundrum. I don't have an easy answer for you, except to say that I think in circumstances like this, as I said, these two journalists really had no choice but to get out.
Peter, appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.